Christmas Day.
Welcome, everybody. Wow, what wonderful music. Great way to get started. I am thrilled that George Lakey will be speaking with us this evening. We're going to have a chance for Q&A. And I hope that when we get to that point that your questions will be brief questions. And if you have comments, to put them in the chat and we'll collect those. And also that you learn to use our electronic hands for the Q&A by looking at the bottom of your screen and you see raised hand and just click it. And I will be responsible for that. And it's wonderful to see you all here, to see such a great bunch of people that I love and care about, and new people that I haven't met yet. And I look forward to seeing you again. And to have George with us, someone that I've known for years, and I will talk about him when I introduce him. I think that's everything I have to say. And so we're going to turn this over to Jane Ellen for a centering exercise.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jane Ellen Nickel. I am on the Third Act Faith Coordinating Committee, and I am in Northwest Pennsylvania with my cat Fergus. You will see him joining us here. I thought for our centering, it was appropriate to do something from the Quaker tradition. So there is an online daily devotion that's the Daily Quaker. We can put the link in the chat if you're interested. One of the recent readings was by N. John Toomer. It's from 1947, but I think it really speaks to us today. So I will read that and then we'll take a couple moments of silence before I draw us to a close. When compared with bodily action, what could seem more inactive than waiting upon God? The modern world asks, where will that get you? Young people say, we want action. Yet, as we have seen, it was precisely through this and other apparently inactive means that the early friends came into a power of whole action that surpasses anything that we experience today. We say we are activists, but often lack the spiritual force to act effectively. They said they were waiters, W-A-I-T-E-R-S, and frequently acted as moved by God's light and love. I think that we are in this age of decreasing interaction, of ever increasing outer activity. We have a profound lesson to learn from the early friends. So I will invite you to reflect on that in a couple of minutes before I draw us to a close. So the daily Quaker reflection ends, when you are eager to rush ahead with action, take the time to first wait on spirit.
Mm,
Blessed be. Amen.
mm. Thank you, Jane Ellen. That was lovely. A good challenge for the day. I forgot to say, my name is Rua Swinnerfelt. I'm a Quaker along with George, and I have the great opportunity to introduce him. You probably have all read many of his accomplishments, but I want to say that he is one of my heroes. And that is because I've learned so much from him. He's a person who not only walks his talk, but he has deep convictions and he's willing to take risks. And he has a wonderful spirit and he's multi-dimensional and he plays the piano beautifully and loves music. But from the civil rights movement through the anti-nuclear movement, through the anti-war movement, and up until this day where he speaks out for Earth in a very deep way. And I thank you, George, for being willing to come here. And I turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, this opening of our time together rhymes with me really well. It's so resonant. I was asked to start out talking about my personal background. As a boy, I learned to tune in to God through the evangelical church that I was a part of. I was brought up a working class boy. And in working class culture, there's some tendency to be very direct and to not like a whole lot of steps between the beginning and the end of something, but to be there, you show up, do whatever needs to be done. And I've carried that with me into my Quaker practice. And fortunately, Quakers were ready for that. So for example, real wanted some personal examples. For example, during the Vietnam War, I felt led by God to volunteer to join a a sailboat of people who were taking medical supplies to the Vietnamese who were suffering under the war and didn't have anything like the amount of medical support that they needed and deserved. And of course, it was my government that was putting them through this horrible thing they were going through. And I felt a particular responsibility as an American, but also as you know, as a Christian, as somebody who follows God. Well, if God tells me to do this, I better do it. The Quaker practice, though, is that if you're, especially if you're somewhat startled by by whatever it is you're feeling led to do, you're supposed to alert the meeting. Hey, meeting, this is happening, and the meeting will help you out. So they set up a committee to meet with me and examine, you know, because maybe there's some bit of insanity showing up or whatever. I was a family man. I had 3 children, a lot of responsibility. What? I should go off on a sailboat to Vietnam and maybe never return? And so I I was questioned strongly by that little Quaker committee, and at the end they said, you know, we actually think this is solidly God calling you to do this, and so we're going to recommend to the meeting that if you don't in fact come back, the meeting will take care of your family for you, so you don't have to go worrying about that. You can just know, follow the leading, and things will work out for the family anyway, even if even if it's not a pleasant end for you. So I've been really, really blessed in that I've had an opportunity to explore different kinds of actions. Thank goodness, mostly not like that, but different kinds of actions, different kinds of impulses to try out. I love the experimental approach of Gandhi. I learned so much from Gandhi, who called his work experiments with truth. I love that. And either way, to just just learn what I can learn along the way. That's been a really, really important part of my life. And I really hope that I reincarnate because there's so much more to learn. And I'm already 86, and how much more of this life will I have? We'll see. Um, you have such great questions to me. Another great question was, how do I stay grounded? I'm a pacifist. How do I stay grounded in the midst of anger and possible violence? One of the great ways that I've learned to do that, there are multiple practices for me, but one of the really fun ways that might be a surprising one for you is that I learned from a mentor the practice of street speaking. That is, putting a box on the sidewalk, getting up and speaking about whatever it is, a social issue of the day, political issue, whatever. Speaking your concern, right? And pretty guaranteed, if you have any volume at all, people will start to gather. It's a curious, odd thing. This is the city of Philadelphia, where I am talking about, and so across from City Hall seemed like a central enough place to do this. And so I would do it over and over and over. And during the Vietnam War, particularly, was when I got into that practice because there was so much concern in the public about the Vietnam War, of all kinds of views, of course, and tremendous polarization of opinion about it. And so it was very easy to draw a crowd talking about Vietnam. And sometimes that was a very threatening crowd. In fact, when I got off the box and somebody else took my place, because I always believe in doing, oh my gosh, this is essential to say, I really believe in teamwork, in doing things that seem at all risky or at all out there. And sometimes things seem risky, even though they're not objectively, because it's just scary to do, right? So I'm a great believer in teams doing that kind of thing. So in that case that I'm talking about, I stepped off the box so somebody else could take my place, and I faded into the crowd. And then I noticed this guy was getting closer and closer, closer to me. And I thought, why are you getting closer and closer, closer? What's going on? And he locked eyes with me, and then his eyes looked down. So I followed the nonverbal suggestion there and looked down, and sure enough, there was a knife with the blade open next to my belly. Oh, so that's what's going on here. So there are opportunities, even in a city like Philadelphia, in broad daylight, to encounter violent responses simply to speaking the truth. And each of those situations where I've been beaten up a number of times and so on, and each time that that's happened, it's been a wonderful life lesson for me. I thank goodness each time I've been able to restrain myself from, I was actually bigger than this guy. On the other hand, a knife is a knife. But I could probably have taken him on physically. But each time that I remember to remain nonviolent when I'm threatened, it strengthens me. It strengthens me. It gives me power. And it builds in my own subconscious a kind of track record of memory and belief in myself, such that I can take on the next thing. So who knows? Tune in next year. Who knows what I'll be up to this coming year. Another interesting question that comes, especially these days, right? All this polarization. I'll get back to that. Another great question that I enjoyed was, let's see if I can find it here. I need glasses for a reason. How do we prepare ourselves as people of faith for possible civil unrest? Well, actually, I think that particular technique, the soapboxing, would be a terrific way for people of faith to get ready to do this. Just get out there on that box with your team from your church, or your fellow Christians, or people of your religious faith, who also want to build their courage. Get out there and do it. Probably nothing will happen, and yet you will feel as though, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. And so much of building courage is getting used to the adrenaline pumping and knowing that you can retain your clarity even in the midst of your adrenaline. there's a lot of people have the kind of actually nonsensical notion that when they get scared, their brain's going to go away and they're not going to know how to perform. But actually, I'm sure a number of you here in this group know that from personal experience. And I can certainly testify that some of the clearest thinking I've done in my life has been times when I've been very, very frightened. I won't tell those times now, but anyway, take my word for it. And so the civil unrest that the question refers to, I think, is almost guaranteed if we're out and about at all, to give us those opportunities for growth in our own empowerment, growth in our confidence in ourselves. Why not go to a meeting of the right wing where they're fomenting whatever, and during the break or afterward, closing in on one of the people as they're leaving or whatever, and engage and see what that's like. We never learn to do conflict well by avoiding it. Actually, my piano teacher taught me that. She said, "You'll never learn, George, to play the piano well by avoiding practice." It kind of makes sense. And I'm talking to a lot of competent people, and you all have your own stories of things that you may have been hesitant about and nevertheless developed competence in. And it's, I'm sure, because you were willing to risk and do it even though you didn't feel on top of the situation in the moment. That's it's kind of a recipe, right? It's a recipe in every field. If it scares you, really important to do that. And and that's just as true for us social activists. There's really no excuse not to, unless you're truly alone and there's nobody to support you at all. Then I can understand you not taking that on. But surely you know somebody who would be with you. Maybe they're more scared than you, but at least they'll stick with you, and maybe bring a first aid kit or something just in case. Yeah, so that's how we prepare ourselves for civil unrest. Although my primary strategy there, and I've been really working on that a lot lately, that question of civil unrest. Our primary duty there, I think, is actually not to go to the people who are most opposed to us, but instead to be going to the people in the middle who are undecided or are timid and cowed by the situation in your vicinity, wherever that is, and try to win them over to support you. And I'll return to that when I talk a little bit about polarization. Well, let me just go ahead and do that because it's so much on my mind. I recently did a 20 state book tour in which I saw so many anxious faces. I can't believe how many anxious faces I saw across the country, whether it was undergraduates in colleges, whether it was older people in churches, wherever, bookstores, so many anxious faces. And I realized that polarization, well, it scares me, but it really scares a lot of people. This is a generalization that can safely be made. Polarization is scary. So I have a very big surprise to share with you about polarization. And to do it, I have to admit the biggest professional mistake I've made in my life. My profession being sociology, I spent multiple years in graduate school learning sociology. That's my trade. And sociologists are fascinated with any group, whether it's a small group or a large group or a society. We are fascinated with the question, to what degree is this group integrated? And to what degree is it instead, full of conflict? We just can't, that's an occupational hazard. We just are fascinated with that question wherever we look, the family or wherever we look. And so I was 15 years ago tracking polarization in my country and noticing that there was more and more of it. And I was getting anxious about that situation because what I was thinking was, I was making an assumption. I was making the assumption that when how can we make the changes that we need to make in our country toward racial justice, economic justice, dealing with the military, all these big issues that we need to tackle, climate. How can we make the progress we need to make if people are so busy throwing darts at each other, they can't pay attention to the issues? That's what I was thinking. So I was really worried about polarization. On the other hand, that was exactly the moment that I embarked on a research project, which was to try to understand what the magic is across the sea in Scandinavia, such that the Nordic countries have manifested so much better societies in terms of economic justice, social justice, such better societies than we have managed to do. I married a Norwegian. That's what gave me the entree to Norway. But I really wanted to study all those countries because they're such an interesting bunch of advanced societies that can teach us so much. Well, in the course of, in fact, that turned into a book. And so, of course, I'm going to wave that at you because it's Forbes magazine, of all places, says it's one of the 5 best books on Scandinavia. And I'm especially tickled that Forbes would think so because I think it's a kind of left perspective. But anyway, Forbes may be more broad-minded than I thought. Anyway, the thing is that when I was working on that book, I was interested not only in how does their system work and why do they get so much payoff from it, but I also wanted to know how did they get that system? Because 100 years ago, they were a mess. They were a mess. Scandinavians were coming here to get out of town because it was so awful over there. In fact, some of you may be descendants of some of those Scandinavians who fled their countries, fled Norway, fled Denmark, fled Sweden, and came to the US because opportunity wasn't there in Scandinavia. The opportunity was here. And so that was 100 years ago. And I got very curious about when did they make their leap such that they now have such superior social systems and such superior economies. And what the big surprise for me was that they made their leap in the 1920s and 30s. In Denmark, it was the 20s, and Sweden picked up on it in the 20s and 30s. And Norwegians picked up on it then. They made their leaps at the times of greatest polarization that they experienced in modern times. Wow. Didn't make any sense to me at all. I thought polarization is a negative factor, preventing progress from being made by society. But they made their leaps at a time of the greatest polarization they'd ever had. Now they don't even bother with polarization, hardly at all. But that was then, that was the 20s and 30s, and they really needed to make that leap. And that's when they did it, when they were the most polarized. Nazis were marching in Denmark. Nazis were marching in Sweden and Norway. And at the same time as that was happening on the right, it was the glory period of the communist parties of those countries. Communists growing like crazy. I mean, I would call that a difference of opinion. And there they were, polarizing like mad. And that was also the environment in which they made their big leap forward. Okay, so I'm thinking, I'm just, you know, my head is just going crazy with that. So I think, okay, George, you believe in case studies, so look at more cases. How about the United States? Okay, well, let's think about in the 1930s for a minute. I was born in the 1930s. The 1930s, the Nazis were growing like mad. They were able to fill Madison Square Garden with a rally. And at the same time, the Ku Klux Klan was going crazy in the South. And at the same time, on the left, it was the glory period of the American Communist Party during this polarization. And we made enormous steps forward in the 30s. Well, another case, please, another case. How about the 1960s? A lot of you remember the 1960s. Would you say it was a particularly boring and stable time. Well, the Nazis were back, you remember. The Ku Klux Klan had graduated from assassinating individuals to blowing up churches. And on the other hand, on the left, all kinds of things going on. Communists were running to catch up with all the other kinds of left formations that were happening in the 60s, and which sloped into the 70s. And again, what was the result? That period, the 60s, that did slope into the 70s, was the most progressive period of the second half of the 20th century. That's when we made our biggest achievements in the second half of the 20th century. Okay, so I'm going crazy. None of this makes sense. None of this makes sense to me. And yet, I'm not prepared to deny reality. I know some Americans are really into that, but I didn't really want to be into that. So at that time, when finally that book had come out, and so I was doing a book tour in Britain. I was staying overnight with a Quaker in a town. He happened to be an artist. I was blown away by his art. He was working with iron. He was working gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous sculptures. Amazing, amazing metal sculptures. And a lot of them were in his house, and I was wandering around the house looking at these things. I said to him, how do you do this? How do you do this with metal? Metal doesn't, I'm sure metal doesn't want to do what you want it to do. And yet, here it is, it's gorgeous. What's your secret? He said, oh, come on, George, I'll show you, come on. So he takes me in the backyard, that's where his studio is. We go in the studio, and he proudly presents to me his forge. And he said, yeah, I had to, apprentice to a blacksmith to learn how to use a forge. Because you're right, metal doesn't want to do what I want it to do. I need to heat it in order to get the result I want. I said, man, you've saved my brain. That's the metaphor I've needed. Polarization is a forge. Polarization is a blacksmith's forge. Heating a society and making it possible for people to make major advances that they, in other periods of time, cannot make. Whoa. Okay, I'm guessing that you'll have a bunch of questions and challenges on that. So let me just go forward. What I want to draw from that, among other things, is that we can use this alternative view of polarization to really turn ourselves around. Maybe in the group you're working with, that isn't needed, but everywhere I've gone in the United States, people are really very anxious about the polarization. I don't think that polarization is a pleasant thing. Please don't misunderstand me. My family can tell you, they will walk into the kitchen some mornings and see me over my granola at breakfast, reading the morning newspaper and crying. Polarization brings tears. It brings anguish. It brings fear. Yes, polarization is tough on us. Just as the blacksmith's forge is tough on the metal, right? It's tough on us. That's one reason why it's so amazing to have a spiritual base. And friends, comrades, people to be with, to shore us up. My prediction is polarization in the United States will get greater. We will have more activity on the right and more corresponding activity on the left and more clashes and more open clashes. Maybe that's what we're looking forward to this December. I don't know. Or maybe in January or February. I don't know. But it's a pretty safe prediction that we're going to have more and more conflict in our society. what a great time to know that in a situation such as that, advances can be gotten which are not available in a quieter time. In other words, this is our moment to move. And I'm so grateful that I've been able to put 2 and 2 together with regard to this. Now, I'm also, please, very open to challenge. So I'm guessing that doing Q&A, you'll be wanting to slam at me about that and raise alternative perspectives and so on, and that's fine with me, because it takes some working through. It certainly took a lot of working through on my part, because as much as I can sing a song about the strengthening character of conflict, there are also plenty of times when I'd say, gee, no, thanks. I'd rather, I'd rather not have some conflict right now. So it's not that I lust for fighting. On the other hand, if it's coming anyway, and there are some positives about it that we can get into later if you want to. Okay, so that was, I think, the major thing that I wanted to share. Let's just see if there was something else. No, I think that was the major thing that I wanted to share, because I'm so keen for your questions and comments. I did want to refer to the other book that came out of this process. I referred to the Viking economics book, which does tell how they went about and used their opportunity. And so that's really useful. And there's one more thing while I'm holding this that I should mention, is that it seems to be the case, and this is the sociologist speaking again, that it's the social movements that present a vision of what they want who are more likely to get that vision than the movements that don't present a vision of what they want, but content themselves with complaining about what they don't like. And we have a checkered career on that. The Scandinavians got it. Oh, right, we need a vision. They developed a vision. They got some economists together, some working class people together, developed a vision, and then they pushed that vision like mad in their polarized time, and they realized that vision. We have tended to be vision averse. Our culture has tended to be vision averse, I'm afraid. And it's been very hard. A lot of my activism for the last 60 years has been pushing people to be willing to invest some energy in visioning. And I haven't, I can't claim much in the way of success on that, but at least there's a vision. I said, well, so, and that turns out to be a popular book. The other book that I wanted to mention is How We Win, where you also see a chapter saying, we need a vision, folks. If we want to replace something with something else, we better say what that something else is and why it pays off, and so on and so on. And that is part of the handbook. And the handbook is going really well these days, because there are a lot of people in our movement who've noticed that we haven't been winning the way we need to and deserve to, especially need to. So that might be plenty for now to get the Q&A going.
Great. Thank you, George, as always. I do want to mention that there's another book, most recent, Dancing with History, which is a memoir of his life. And it is very inspiring and beautifully written, and I highly recommend it. And it is the basis for the documentary that will be available in November through Bullfrog Films. So I want to remind people that the Q&A is by using your raised hand, electronic hand. We'll have a good 25 or 30 minutes for Q&A. So if anyone does have a question for George, feel free to raise that electronic hand and I'll call on you. Yes, Christopher.
So, Mr. Lakey, in the 60s, we had incredible ambitions to change the world. Many changes have taken place, not all of which I think we were responsible for by any means. But one of the issues that keeps coming up is our inability to change the behavior of capitalist institutions. So we just spent the summer of heat in New York City, obstructing at Citibank. We tarnished their brand. I think that was true. We went from being a gnat in the room, a fly in the room that they ignored, to being a bee on their butt. But the struggle continues. But the problem is we're dealing with incredibly large, powerful, well-financed institutions, and I haven't seen. We're more likely, because of the vote, to have an impact on policies locally and nationally than we are on this amorphous, financier of all of these problems. Any thoughts on how we challenge them?
Oh, yes, very much. Well, I think in strategy terms, it's really more fun to choose a target that is winnable. That is to go after somebody with a demand that is reasonable to think you can get. And if the institution is too large and too powerful and your forces aren't very great, then you're not likely to get that. So my personal experience, I started a group called Quaker Action Team long ago, I don't know, a dozen years ago or so. Our first target was a bank. It was a bank, but it was the 7th largest bank in the country. So it wasn't up there in the really, really big ones. Didn't have local banks in all the states. It only had banks in 2/3 of the states. So it was a formidable opponent. I mean, there were friends calling me and saying, George, now you've really lost your mind to go after PNC Bank. And I said, no, I think it's actually possible, but it's going to take a long time. Well, it did. It took 5 years. It took 5 years. We started in one state, and then we were able to do our demonstrations in 2 states, and then 3 states. Our favorite demonstration, I'll share this because it's illustrative, I think, of the kind of thing that can work. The we was Quaker Action Team. That is a Quaker group. And of course, Quakers are prone to worship in all kinds of odd spots. So what we would do is we would go in and sit in the lobby of the floor in a circle and worship. Bank operations would stop, tellers would forget how much change they'd given you. Everybody was staring at the circle of people on the floors, praying and singing instead of doing their job, right? And the poor bank manager would be, oh my God, what do I do? How do I get these people out of me? I don't want to call the police. That's a big fuss. But on the other hand, it doesn't look like they're leaving yet. And then, so usually the police would come. We always decided ahead of time whether we would go when the police came or whether we would stay and get arrested. So if we were, for a variety of reasons, ready to get arrested, then we would just keep sitting there and be arrested. And so one of the things about that action was it was very compressed and time limited, and pretty easy to do. So then we found, well, let's do 2 banks at the same time. That will strengthen our muscles and grow us. So that's what we did. We did 2 towns, and then how about 3 at a time? And then a couple months later, we think we're strong enough to do 4 local banks at a time. So the poor PNC management was, oh my God, where are they going to strike next? Oh my God, what do we do with these Quakers? Oh my God. And so we were able to be in 1 state, 2 states, 3 states, 4 states. Well, by the time we were able to do simultaneous uh, worship actions in 13 states, moving west, they'd had it. Now, it took us 5 years to get that to that point because we started in my living room. We started very small, but we just kept growing and growing and growing. And that persistence was exciting. It was very dynamic and motivating for people. And so we just kept taking on more and more and more banks. Sometimes they would just close the bank ahead of time. We would arrive and bank closed. We would declare victory. We'd do a dance. Yeah, on and on and on. We had a lot of sort of fun energy as well as Quaker worship energy. And so after 5 years, we won. We went to a couple of shareholders meetings. We shot 2 of them down. So we just had this grand time. So the 7th largest bank in the country, we were able to force to give up mountaintop removal coal mining, which is what they were financing. And there again, we were very specific about our objective. If we had said, give up all climate related stuff, then, we'd still be at it. No, we defined a goal that was in principle realizable, still not knowing whether we would actually succeed or not. So because activists, I know we activists are amazingly committed people, but sometimes we can imagine, well, we can grow a movement full of lots of people who aren't actually like me. And that's not really true. Most people actually want some bang for the buck. Most people want a result, right? And so we need to learn how to choose targets, define goals in such a way that we can declare victory fairly frequently and keep people joining because, oh, this is a group that's on they're on the move, and wow, they pulled that off. And well, they were doing three street banks in 3 states. Now they're doing banks in 5 states. Oh my gosh. And and it's not only fun, but it also attracts more people. So in a way, this is just basic strategizing. It's the kind of thing I write about a lot in How We Win. It's how to strategize in such a way as to keep a win in mind. Because if we don't do that, then all we get is people who are there on the basis of faith, but not on the basis of accomplishment. And let's face it, most people are not going to join the movement on the basis of a set of convictions. They're going to actually want to win. Now, I learned that from the civil rights movement. I was part of the civil rights movement. And the civil rights movement, by and large, well, notice, for example, the lunch counters. The lunch counter sit-ins were winnable, right? So a black college in North Carolina would try a lunch counter and win. Whoa! Then the college that they played football with against, over in the next county, said, whoa, hey, they got a lunch counter to integrate. Why can't we? We can do it too, right? So then, it's a matter of honor. We play basketball or whatever we play with them, and now we can do a lunch counter too. And the lunch counter movement spread very, very rapidly because people were choosing a target that was amenable and a size of demand that was in principle winnable. Not that they've always won, but anyway, fairly frequently. I'm sure you're catching my point. So I just think strategy means a tremendous lot, and strategy can be fun. Sometimes people, I think, of faith, imagine that strategy is maybe an ugly thing or just awkward or cumbersome or something. But actually, strategy can be fun. I mean, I know people who actually play Monopoly and Parcheesi, and I don't know, how many of you played some kind of game or other sometime in your life, or maybe gone to a basketball game and rooted for somebody? Or, I mean, isn't that the American way? Or maybe the human way is to play games. So let's do that. Let's use strategy, and then we can more often win. I don't have a judgment about the particular campaign that you were part of. I don't have a judgment about that bank. I haven't researched it. Research really pays off in approaching change the way I approach it. Really pays to research. the group that won on the bank is now going up against Vanguard. Well, Vanguard looks appetizing because it is so humongously involved in destroying the future of our grandchildren in the name of security, right? Vanguard's all about security in old age, right? So we will give you security in old age and be sure to destroy the future for your grandchildren, is what they really should be saying. So it was just so tempting that the leadership of the organization I started couldn't resist going after Vanguard. And we were asked by an international coalition that's already going after Vanguard to be the US, or at least in the Eastern US wing of their coalition. So we thought, well, it's a coalition, it's not just us. So, okay, we'll jump in. I still have reservations about whether that was wise, because Vanguard looks to me like picking on somebody and not our size. And that I don't think that we can win. So I really do think winning matters. And especially if we want to attract new people, and we've got to attract new people, right? That's what the civil rights movement did. It kept attracting new people because there was a good chance in multiple situations, like the bus boycott in Montgomery, there was a good chance that they could win. And they did very often.
George, we
Yeah.
have another question from Nan. You still there, Nan?
Yes, I'm here.
Great. You have a-
Well, I've picked a target, and now I'm wondering if it's truly winnable. My target is a big multinational corporation that's running a coal plant near my city.
Mm,
They're not making money on it. And the city has grown out, and so it's now starting to surround the coal plant. And if they crossed over their energy production from coal to some other kind of clean tech, they could make more money.
Oh, well, that's motivating. Isn't it?
It doesn't sound too bad, huh?
No, that doesn't sound so bad. I mean, I would keep doing research. I love the way you're thinking about it.
Oh, I've already stuck my
What
neck.
are the incentives for them, and so on, and how can you increase those incentives and also be a real drag for them if they don't do
Well, I've already stuck my neck out. I'm kind of committed to it. I mean, I could stop now, but I keep telling the other people that are opposing power plants in their neighborhood. There's a gang of people with lovely homes that just beat down a power plant in their neighborhood. And it was just a gas plant. It wasn't even toxic, or not hardly toxic. And so I'm kind of saying, come on, guys, we can win this. Let's go after the big one. Let's go after the big, ugly one. But I guess I won't know. I guess I could brainstorm.
Yeah, and I would definitely, get a committee together to research it more fully, because I respect your gut. Your gut says we can win this, so that's great. And on the other hand, to convince others, it's really, really helpful to do research and to get a committee doing research so that they say, yes, she feels it strongly, and we're now convinced too. Or they may come up with an alternative. They may find reasons why that corporate board would be dug in such a way as not to be willing to let you win.
mhm.
Yeah, it's I can't make a long distance prediction on that, but I think local research could be.
I've done a lot of research.
Oh, good.
Still looks winnable. It's much more winnable than this silly little coal plant. I mean, this
Okay.
silly little gas plant that they just won on.
Okay.
Good for you, Nan. Thanks so much for your work. Yay. Is there another question for George? Yes, Catherine.
audio and video on. Hi, George. I'm sure you can see. I'm not sure you can see me. 1 second. So George, I'm a friend also in New York City, and I just really want to really call out and lift up what you were saying, and also just how much joy you're bringing to the work that you're doing, which I think is really important as we do this, that in the long haul. I guess my question is, how do we, as a person of faith and as a Quaker, how we not demonize the people in this who may be on the other side and continue to polarize and to feed and nurture the polarization, because I do think you're right that in my experience as a Quaker in the discernment, that friction is where the light comes from. It's like when we're kind of in that oppositional place, that's actually where new ideas come up and solutions, etc. But how do we keep that and hold the other people that we're in opposition with without actually losing our own spirit?
Well, one method is to make contact with them. Like before we started on the bank, we sat down with the vice president of one of the major banks and said, hey, we want to come after you. And we had quite a conversation, and I felt connected. So I think, and all those banks we did occupations in and stuff, we would send love to the tellers and stuff like that. So I think making contact with bank personnel or whoever the personnel are in the opponent that you're tackling is really humanizing. It's really humanizing. And showing your own humanity is another thing too, because sometimes we don't, when we're in action and we're scared, and of course I'm usually scared when I'm in action, if confrontational action, we sometimes put on a kind of mask that doesn't allow our own humanity to show either. So it's not that easy for them to see us as human, and not that easy for us to see them as human. And so showing up in our humanity is really important. I find singing to be one of the things that's really shores us up. For example, the time that the first time we shut down a shareholders meeting, the national owners of this bank, are all assembled in this big room, and there's a platform, and the CEO is up there with the treasurer and the secretary, and they are, and the board, all the board of directors are in the first rows of the auditorium, and then the shareholders are behind them. We had become shareholders. We had to in order to get in the meeting. So we all were carrying our share, and so there we all were. But as we were getting closer and closer to the date, we were getting more and more scared, because Quakers, I don't know about Quakers where you live, but Quakers around Philadelphia can be kind of timid about confrontation. And our intention was to confront, right? So as we were getting closer and closer, we were getting more and more scared. So we had a consultant to the organization. By the way, that's something I really recommend. If you have an organization on the ground that you work with, get a consultant who is somebody who is for your organization and for what you're aiming at, but who stands outside the organization in giving that person enough distance so they can keep some objective sense, of what's going on. And you can go to them to get that objective sense. So we go to Daniel when I noticed the 16 of us who had bought shares so we could go into the meeting. I noticed that we were getting more and more scared. So I went to Daniel and I said, Daniel, what do you suggest? And he said, oh, right. What do you, yeah, I'm not surprised. You Quakers, you're very scaredy cats. And yeah. He's a Baptist, and so he loves to tease us. And he said, well, what can we do about this? He said, oh, this is a hard one. He said, I know what, you folks like to have meetings, don't you? And I said, right. Okay, well then, why don't you prepare an agenda ahead of time of the meeting that you want to have? and then go in there planning to have your meeting. It's just that it happens to be at the same time they're having their meeting and in the same space. Oh, our little committee said we could do that. I mean, we are meeting awesome. You know, we dream of having meetings. We're nuts about meetings, so we're sure fine with meetings. So yeah, we'll go in there. So that's what we did. So we developed an agenda, and then we went in there and we scattered all over the room. So there were lots of shareholders around us. And so we were, you know, we were distanced, but we could see each other, and we had our agenda. And so the chair, the CEO, says, "Okay, we will have the reading of the minutes." But you know what? That just happened to be the moment when our first agenda item was up. And so the first person carrying that agenda item jumps up and starts speaking very loudly about mountaintop removal, coal mining, and why the bank shouldn't, blah 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 blah. And the back rows of the auditorium, by the way, were filled with police because the bank was surveilling us. We're very proud to be surveilled, by the way. That's always a breakthrough for a social change organization. Like if you're in a social change group or peace group or something that's not being surveilled, I would think twice about whether you're effective. I mean, you really deserve to be surveilled, right? So you need to step up and get surveilled in order to know that you matter, right? Okay, so we were surveilled. We were very proud of that. So they knew very well what we were planning to do. But we had our shares. We were owners, co-owners of the bank, and we could sit wherever we wanted. So our first person jumps up and starts with our agenda item, blah blah blah, very loudly as their person on the platform is doing, and so everybody's obviously paying attention to us. All the shareholders paying attention to that person, and the CEO is getting more and more antsy. And just before he calls for the police to shut us down, that person sat down. All right, says the CEO. Now let's have the treasurer's report. Okay, so the treasurer gets up and starts it. But you know what? That just happens to be the moment when our second agenda item is up. And so the person assigned to that jumps up and starts whoa, 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 with our second agenda item. And that's the dance we dance over and over and over again until about six agenda item 6. The CEO says, "This meeting's adjourned." And everybody's shocked, we as much as anybody, and what to do. And everybody's just sitting there like looking at each other. What? This is only 20 minutes into the meeting. It's an hour and a half meeting, and it's only 20 minutes. And just in that moment of uncertainty, my daughter, who was in the group, in our group, started singing, "This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine." And the rest of us, of course, knowing that song, all jumped in. And so we're all singing. So we're getting up and moving toward the doors because that's what the CEO said we should do. The meeting was over. Let's head for the doors. But as we were singing, as we were doing it, we were singing, "This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine." And I noticed a few of the shareholders started singing, "This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine." Such a good time. So I recommend that for your tactics. Find ways of confronting that enable people to somehow stay in possession of their center, right, rather than just being full of fear, and a sense of being together with each other, and also a plan that's easily executable, and that enables you to have a little fun, maybe.
Great. Well, George, we have another person that asked a question. Mike Coop.
Yes, thank you very much. This has been a wonderful hour. I'm really glad to be with everybody. I'm a United Methodist, since we're identifying. And I just want a comment about the tension between what is winnable and what is absolutely essential in regards to the climate. We cannot continue to build out any more fossil fuel infrastructure to stay within the limits that science says is dictated. So what would you say about that tension between winnable and what's demanded scientifically?
The intervening variable there is grow the movement. Growing the movement. So, for example, those lunch counter sit-ins in 1960, there's no way that that ancient system of racial segregation in the South could be handled by just being able to get coffee, letting Black people get coffee, right? That doesn't crack the racial segregation that existed in the South. But that wasn't the point of the sit-ins. The point of the sit-ins was to build the movement. And didn't it do it? It was an easily replicable action. More and more people could go after the lunch counter in their town, we'll do it. And more, and so it was a feasible, winnable thing that built the movement. And people, therefore, who were feeling powerless, as most people in our country feel about climate, most people feel powerless. People in the South could feel like, damn, we won something, didn't we? What's next? And there was Dr. King with, oh my gosh, a bus boycott. 50,000 Black people on the move in Montgomery, Alabama. Whoa, that is way different from 24 students in a Black college, coming to the lunch counter and sitting in. 50,000 Black people boycotting buses? Are you serious? And so on and so on and so on. We know the history of the civil rights movement, which, by the way, is I've done so much international work. I've led trainings on 5 continents in this world, and so many countries don't have in their history something like the civil rights movement is for us. We are so lucky. We've got one of the most brilliant and hard-hitting, powerful, and God-led movements of any place I know in the world, right here in the US. And did we ever use that? Some of you will remember, you're old enough to remember, that the civil rights movement opened this country up. But they had to become a mass movement to do that. And they became a mass movement because first it was coffee. You see? So and that's not different from anything else. How did you learn algebra or whatever? Did you go to the last chapter in the algebra book first? Right? I mean, how do we learn anything? So we need to learn how to build mass movements. We've got an exemplary mass movement very recently called the Civil Rights Movement that we can learn from. I digest a lot of those lessons in the How We Win book, as well as lessons from other movements. What we can do is, we can start with chapter 1 in the algebra book and we can get to the last chapter. But let's start with chapter 1. Let's do the things that need to be done to build the mass movement, because you're absolutely right. It takes a mass movement to turn this climate situation around. And nothing will work besides a mass movement. The capitalists are digging in, right? They're digging in. Science be damned, right? Their attitude is, we will make money no matter how many people die. That is their attitude. Okay, so it takes a mass movement to take care of the class that's run this country for what, 2 centuries, 3? These folks are not pushovers. The corporate leadership of this country are not pushovers. How did we ever think that we could do a few demonstrations and that something would change that is for them fundamental? It's obviously fundamental, or they wouldn't be destroying the future of their great-grandkids.
Mhm.
Now, I know their great-grandkids are going to live in New Zealand. I know. So they do have a plan. But nevertheless, you get the point. They are doubling down in the destruction of the life chances for our great-grandchildren. I have 8 great-grandchildren. They don't care. They must be forced to give that up. They will not give it up otherwise. They will not. So, but we cannot force them to do it except with a mass movement. What was the movement that got Dr. King sitting in the Oval Office with Lyndon Johnson? Lyndon Johnson, who at that moment was arguably the most powerful person on earth. The single most powerful person on earth. And Lyndon Johnson said to Dr. King, you have to stop that march to Selma. I will not put up with you doing that march from Montgomery to Selma. People were already assembled in Montgomery, ready to go. You must stop that, said Lyndon Johnson, the most powerful person in the world. And what did Dr. King do? He said, we will march. Now, you cannot say that to the most powerful person on earth unless you have a mass movement behind you. We can put ourselves in that situation. I believe that we can. That's why I wrote the book, How We Win. But it's not 0 to 80, right? It takes small groups to build larger groups, step by step by step. And the acceleration of small movements to large movements can be enormously fast. That's, again, civil rights movement teaches us that. 1960, sit-ins. Next thing you know, oh my gosh, the South is aflame. That's what's possible. That's what's possible. And since climate is an issue that hits everybody, it's not even like, well, let's purify our water or something, so many of these great goals that we've got as climate-oriented people or social change goals of various kinds. It's crucial. It's life or death. It's life or death. So, and people don't need instruction about it, but what they need is to overcome their cynicism that why bother to put themselves out of joint to do something if these people can't change anything anyway. Do you see why that's so critical? That's why our ability to stop the banks over and over and over and over. I mean, in some ways, it just seemed like so, oh, come on, George. But the fact that now we've stopped 3 banks, now we've got 5 banks, now 8 banks. One day we were 33 banks shut down. And people said, damn, these folks are getting something done. Right? So it's all in the perception, obviously. I'm talking perception, right? I mean, but on the other hand, the 7th largest bank in the world, in the country, did cave. They caved.
Yay. And George, we
So
are coming
yeah. So that's what
right down to the end.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
I don't know if you can do this, but you get 1 minute to end what you might say in a minute to all of us.
My favorite movements were singing movements. So the nonverbal, I mean, here I am haranguing you, but it's actually the nonverbal that makes the bigger difference. And whether that's quiet for Quakers or singing for evangelicals or both. Yeah. Conveying that sense of togetherness. We're in it together, right? Together. And we can do together what we can't do alone. Thank you so much.
Thank you, George. And we did ask you to come and harangue us, so we're glad you did. So I'm going to turn it over to Betsy, who's going to do a wrap up. Hi, Betsy.
Thank you so much, George and Rua, and everyone who participated by asking questions and writing in the chat. We have a lot to think about. And as the election approaches, I noticed some of the notes that George struck really speak to the work that we're doing right now in Third Act and Third Act Faith, especially thinking about teamwork, not doing this work alone, going to the people who are in the middle of these polarized times. That's kind of our work between now and Election Day. And asking where the Spirit is leading us. What are each one of us called to do, and what are we as a movement called to do? And most of all, we're trying to go for the win here. So with all of those things in mind, I've got a couple announcements about what's going on with the Get Out the Vote effort from Third Act, and then we have a couple more announcements from Third Act Faith of upcoming events. So probably most important for everyone to know about the Get Out the Vote effort for Third Act now is that everything is found now under GRAPAC, which is the political action group that is connected with Third Act. And that's at grapac.org. We'll be putting links here in the chat. You might want to go explore the GRAPAC website, especially pay attention to, there's a page called What We Do. We'll put a link up to that, which has a lot of the various actions that you can sign up for and participate in to help get out the vote. You might also want to register for Third Act's election countdown Zooms. Well, I guess now we call them the GRAPAC election countdown Zooms. These are held on alternate Wednesdays at 6 o'clock Eastern. And tomorrow is one of the Wednesdays that it's held. So if you're trying to figure that out, it'll be this Wednesday and then 2 weeks from Wednesday. It's a great time to tune in. We hear about interesting things that other Third Act groups are doing. We can hear about what GRAPAC has, again, for each one of us to participate in, and just sort of get a sense of what impact our actions are having. I find it really motivating to tune into those Wednesday calls and find out what's happening. I found out 2 weeks ago, for those of us who aren't big on phone banking, that you can do text banking. And there's just, so many different things. If you go to the GRAPAC website, I think everyone can find something to do to help the cause. Thinking back to our workshop in August, I hope some of us are preaching those election sermons or using insights from our August program to speak with others in our faith community about the necessity of voting and the values to consider when voting. If you haven't seen that webinar yet about the election sermon, you can go to the Third Act YouTube channel and see a recording of that. And finally, on the 23rd of October, we will be having a contemplative practice to address election stress. And the link for that will be in the chat. And for our general meeting on October 29th, we're going to begin with a contemplative gathering. We know that'll be a week before the election. A lot of people will not be able to be at the general meeting that night. But if you are, we thought it'd be good to have the first part of the meeting be a chance to quiet ourselves and kind of center ourselves in the middle of all that work. And then the second half of the meeting, we will just be checking in with each other and seeing how we're doing a week before the election. So thank you again to everyone for being on the call, to Kathleen Dixon, my co-facilitator, for all the work behind the scenes to organize this. And again, many, many thanks, George, for being here with us and giving us a lot to think about. And I think Kathleen has some music.
Mm.
Oh, I should show this
When-
book. You brought it up, Rua.
Cause I'm on the edge of darkness. There rides the peace train. Oh, peace train, take this country. Come take me home again.
Now I've been smiling lately, thinking about the good things to come. And I believe it could be something good has begun. Peace train sounding louder, glide on the peace train. Peace train, holy roller, everyone jump upon the peace train.
Rendin chomchima arkidam bata seila de mangaron unade kadi pani ma joni eto mandola ar abodam dam dam bunam dam watadi ma unade pani ma joni unsoko.
Peace train sounding loud, glide on the peace train.
Oh, I've been crying lately, thinking about the world as it is. Why must we go on hating? Why can't we live in bliss? Peace train sounding louder, glide on the peace train. Ooh, come on, peace train. Peace train, holy roller, everyone jump on the peace train. Ooh, come on, come on, come on.
Come on, ride
Sounding loud,
on the peace train.
Come on, come on, come on. Let's come on, peace train.
come on, come on, come on. Peace train.
Come on, join me. I'm jumping on the peace train.
Come on, peace train.
Mm.
Thanks,
I want-
everybody.
I want a link to that.
Yes.
Me too.
That's beautiful.
Thanks for being with us.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody. Have a great night.
Peace.
Peace.